Hey, today I'm going to talk about Apollo Records and the owner and friend of mine who has passed away, unfortunately, in 2016. But Gary Sperrazza was the owner and operator of Apollo Records, which was on Elmwood Avenue. And Gary was one of those people who could be very polarizing to people who met him. Some people that I speak to hated him. Other people I know love him. I happen to be in that category because even though Gary and I might have had a love-hate relationship, and maybe this happened with a lot of people that Gary knew, I will credit Gary as being another influence on my musical knowledge in Buffalo in terms of where the crowds should be going. Got to keep in mind, back in 1983, 85, the music scene in Buffalo was strictly top 40. Top 40 ruled everywhere. So when the little radio station at WBNY on Buffalo State campus started programming alternative college music, that was definitely not the norm in Buffalo. You know, that was an uphill battle. So stores like Gary's was a small little store on Elmwood Avenue, and it featured a lot of different music that you couldn't find at, say, Record Theater or even at Home of the Hits, when that was also one of the other record stores in the area. First time I went into the store, and I had just wandered in there. Someone had mentioned it to me, and I strolled in the store, and I walked in, and all I saw were records, and I thought, oh, this is the place for me. And they were records that were not mainstream records. So I knew that it made it even better for me because I was really in that phase where I was trying to break away from dealing with top 40 music programming. I had started working at the Continental at that time, and so that was in '85. And Gary was also a DJ, and he had DJ nights at the Continental, through parties throughout Buffalo. He knew all the DJs that knew what was going on in Buffalo music, and just in music in general. And I considered a lot of the people that went into Apollo Records, they were the more progressive DJs in Buffalo. If there was a song that someone was looking for, Gary would have it. If he didn't have it, he would order it, and he would get enough copies in there so not everybody would have a copy of that record, you know what I mean? He didn't want to just saturate the area, but I guess he was picking and choosing the DJs, because every time I'd see him, he would say, next time you come in the store, you're going to have to buy this and this and this and this. And I trusted Gary's opinion because I knew, first of all, he had such a deep musical knowledge. Back in his day, he had started a magazine and basically was the founder and editor of Shakin' Street Gazette, and wrote many articles. And he also wrote for other publications like the New York Rocker, Phonograph Record, some different publications. But he had a vast knowledge of music from across the board, different parties that were thrown. He brought the Batcave party from London, and he had permission from them to use the name without being sued. And he threw Batcave parties in Buffalo. At the Continental, he threw some Batcave parties. They actually were throwing these parties at Mulligan's over on Hurdle Avenue in the back room for a while. And I remember going over there and checking them out. Now, a lot of people were there, but it was, first of all, that was a testament right there and then and there that for an establishment like Mulligan's, which was definitely a top 40 dance-oriented place, to allow Gary to come in there and do what he did there. I mean, that was just unheard of in Buffalo at the time. And I'm sure that was his close association with the DJ Charlie Angelo, who was the DJ at Mulligan's, who, I mean, if you know Mulligan's was the place where people would always go because they knew Rick James would be there. Any stars that came into Buffalo at the time would be at Mulligan's. It was that type of an environment. They had their front area, and then they had a little private VIP area in the back, and that's where you wanted to be. That's where it was. The scene was really happening. Was in that VIP. You needed a card to get in there. The first time I went to just get to Mulligan's, I went with a girlfriend I was dating at the time at Buff State, and her girlfriend. And it was ladies' night, I think, and they wanted to go. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to go because I'm not going to be able to go in the back room with you. I don't have a card. I know you two can get in there. So my girlfriend talked me into coming along, and we get there, and we're sitting at the bar, and they start schmoozing with the bouncer who was in charge of that back door. And somehow they distracted him enough, and I snuck on through. And so I was in there waiting for the girls to come in, and we finally hung out there. And I do remember eventually meeting Charlie Angelo, and he was just, he's the godfather of disco in Buffalo. Charlie Angelo was doing stuff. He had the TV show, his association with Denny Terrio. They used to do their show from the 747. And, you know, so Charlie Angelo was also a very big influence in terms of the music. He was the king in terms of dance music in Buffalo. One of the times I remember Gary was hanging out with us at the Continental, and we were at the dance floor. And I remember standing, Gary would never come up and dance. I mean, it's so rare that I ever saw Gary dancing. But he would just stand by the dance floor. He'd have his black long jacket on, his, I guess it was like some sort of I don't even know what kind of coat it was, but it was always black. And he had a scarf that he would always have. It was black scarf with this red little accents on it. And then, you know, he wore that thing all the time. So that was his trademark, one of his trademarks. The store at Apollo, if you've ever been into Apollo and if you ever had that opportunity, you would notice that there was tons of signs in the store. Handmade signs everywhere in the store. So you'd be looking around. I remember it was one of the first times I'd ask Gary a question when I was in his store. I said, hey, I'm looking for this and blah, blah, blah. And what he was reading a magazine or something, or doing some work at his counter, and he was the only one there at the time. All he did was he just pointed up at a sign. And so here I am, I'm thinking to myself, dude, I'm gonna pay you some good money. I don't even know this guy, but he just won't even respond to me. Yet that's how Gary was when he was intent in doing something. He was just like, nope, I gotta take care of this first, and then I'll take care of you later. A lot of people didn't like that style, but you know what? For me, it was fine, because I learned and explored that store from top to bottom. So eventually, at one point in time when I lived in Buffalo, I was working at Apollo Records, which was kind of a cool thing to do, because I had first access to a lot of music that a lot of the other DJs would not know. Gary would have his bootleg mixtapes. I remember the first time I heard DJ Red Alert from New York. It was on a bootleg mixtape that he had. So many other DJs that came through that he would have these bootlegs. You go in there and get videos of all kinds of foreign videos, anime videos, anybody. Gary had so many of these things in his store before it was even a thing, and people in Buffalo knew about it. So that's why I liked hanging out with Gary, because he was just like one of those people who was always a forward-thinking kind of a person. His customer service abilities and skills may have been left to be desired, a little bit to be desired there, but hey, you know what? When you have that knowledge, I can't fault him for really kind of just concentrating and focusing on what it was that he was trying to do and build there to help create the scene and help build up the scene. That was one of those things where, you know, one of the scene's biggest fans was also the biggest critic, and that's what you want in people who are in your music scene. Open, honest. So yeah, I wanted to just say that Gary was a very good friend. Like I said, we might have had ups and downs during our course of our friendship, but I was very disheartened to hear that he had moved out to California at one point in time, closed the store, and I lost touch with him. And then somebody had told me he had moved back to Buffalo and they'd seen him, that he was homeless, and that was very unfortunate to hear that. And I don't know the circumstances, but I was at least hoping at one point in time when I was in town for Robbie's Music is Art, that I would have had a chance to run into Gary. And that was the year that I was gonna try to track him down and find him, because I'd heard of a shelter that he was living in. And I'd heard that he had just passed right prior to my trip plans. So unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to reunite with an old friend and go over old times with him. But I want to say thank you to Gary Sperrazza for opening my mind, opening a lot of people's minds in Buffalo to the experience of trying something new, something that was different, something that was off the beaten path, making your mark. That was the best thing about the experience that I had at Apollo Records, the people who came in there. So Yeah, thanks, Gary. I appreciate it very much. And rest in peace, my brother.